Then that takes you to item 9.3. This is a motion by Councillor Neil Ross on the quiet route from Greenbank to the Meadows. We have a coalition amendment, a Conservative amendment and a Green amendment.
Councillor Neil Ross.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I should, I think, declare an interest in the subject of this motion as I live locally. But I'd like to start by being clear on 3 points. I want to encourage more walking, cycling and travel by bus and reduce unnecessary car use. And I believe most people in Edinburgh share that objective. Secondly, I want to see traffic schemes that take account of everyone's needs. And thirdly, a successful local traffic scheme should have a clear mandate from residents and a solid legal foundation. Lord Provost, proposals have been put forward for a quiet route through Morningside from Greenbank traffic lights to the Meadows to encourage cycling. I know it's a quiet route as I have walked and cycled along it on a daily basis since I was elected in 2017. The point is, apart from rush hour, this is already a quiet route for cycling. So how could more cyclists be encouraged to use it? Cyclists have told me one of their biggest fears is hitting a pothole or an uneven patch of road and falling off their bike. Poor road surfaces put off novice cyclists. Sections of this route are in really poor condition. The quality of the road surface is a major factor in determining a cyclist's choice of route. The proposals involve 6 road closures that would clearly have a major impact on the flow of motor vehicles around the area. So, what studies or assessments have been undertaken on the implications of these quiet route proposals for traffic levels on main roads and of the likely extended length of journeys for most residents in this area? I have asked, but I have had no answer yet. These assessments must be made public. The unplanned closure of Braid Road has increased the length of residents' journeys and raised CO2 and particulate pollution and congestion on Comiston Road, in particular outside South Morningside Primary School. I don't want to see more traffic chaos on main roads and increases in CO2 and particulate pollution because residents have to make convoluted journeys around their local streets because of road closures. But I do want to see Braid Road reopened as soon as possible with traffic calming measures and improvements for pedestrians and cyclists. Lord Provost, we have a better understanding now of the risks of transmission of coronavirus than we did in March, and they are relatively low if you are passing someone outside. No residents have contacted me to raise concerns about the risks of transmission of coronavirus when on this route. Therefore, the Council should be honest about this. There is really no justification for using a temporary traffic regulation order to implement this scheme. To do so could be seen to be an abuse of Council powers. The recently published Scottish Household Survey recorded 68% of people are concerned about climate change. I believe that many people are receptive to making changes to the way they work, travel and impact on the planet, and I strongly believe they want to be involved in making decisions about how society and their local area can change. I want to work constructively with the Council on this and other Spaces for People projects. However, I'm not convinced that closing roads 24 hours a day, 7 days a week would reduce traffic movements. Instead, they will lengthen residents' essential journeys and increase traffic build-ups on main roads. Imposing change without engaging residents in advance is not the way to convert people. It comes across as undemocratic and an abuse of power. Local residents have told me it is symptomatic of an arrogant we-know-best approach that isn't welcome. To succeed with local traffic schemes, I believe you need to bring people with you. A proper public consultation means more buy-in from residents, a greater level of trust in the Council, and usually better outcomes for all. Lord Provost, last week, in answer to a question on the East Craigs low-traffic neighbourhood from Alex Cole-Hamilton, the Liberal Democrat MSP for Edinburgh Western, the First Minister said, "Local people should be properly consulted and listened to about local schemes." She added, "I hope Edinburgh Council will listen." So do I. On behalf of the Lib Dem group, I propose this motion.
Thank you. And to second the motion?
Yes, that's myself, Lord Provost, just formally.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lang. And to move the amendment by the Coalition, Councillor McInnes.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I agree with Councillor Ross that it is always important to have a true understanding of what is being proposed and to be able to amend and to change as we go through a process. That's always been the route of this administration, and it is clearly enshrined in the way in which the Spaces for People initiative was set up, and indeed the approach on this particular set of proposals. However, I do regret the fact that he's brought forward such a detailed motion around this, which quite frankly jumps the gun. It is absolutely clear that that was an outline proposal that councillors received a briefing on, and it's now gone out into the public and it's been massaged into being something entirely different. The intention was that we would bring the report forward to November the 12th at the Transport and Environment Committee. That will of course give plenty of opportunity for proper democratic scrutiny by elected members, which is right and appropriate. But it also gives an opportunity for engagement with the key stakeholders. And that process has not yet started. And yet it would appear that from some of the comments that are being made around his motion, that there is an expectation that that should already have taken place. That is a process that we are going to be going through, as we would of course do, in order to gain acceptance. Now, you are making, in quite a lot of the comments that my apologies, Councillor Ross has made around this. He states, for example, that air pollution has gone up and that traffic around Comiston Road has gone up, and makes various statements. I'd be really interested to know when he's undertaken that particular bit of research and how rounded that research is, because that's research that's still ongoing by the council, and we will be establishing even more results of that as we go through in the run-up to the November the 12th discussion. And it'll be on the basis of that that we will be able to have that full discussion. So when we look at our motion that we brought forward, it's quite clear that I'm referring to the fact that there is a period of time between now and November the 12th when we have an opportunity to undertake stakeholder engagement. The proposal is also based on some very detailed conversations that we've had with Blackford Safer Routes, which is a community-led organisation that's been calling for this precisely in order to be able to do to undertake this. They've recognised that need for quite some time, and indeed I met with them over a year ago about this particular aspect of it that they're keen to bring forward. I do recognise the fact that there is considerable concern circulating in the community about the consultation process, but there is a feedback mechanism properly put in place and agreed by this council, which will be adhered to for this proposal as with any of the others. And as a last part of the motion that I'm bringing forward, I have requested an early meeting, which I will convene amongst all the relevant ward councillors and the transport spokespeople in order to be able to explore some of the issues around this particular project. You will then, any ward council would then have an opportunity to bring forward concerns from their community and to hear a response to that from council officers around the technicalities of this particular scheme. So for that reason, I believe that our motion is actually a more effective one to bring forward that meets the needs of the community and says quite clearly this is a process that we need to follow. I'm also very happy to join forces on with the Greens on this one, because I think that the motion that they're bringing forward also reflects that same trajectory. I will, of course, leave it to Councillor Mean to talk about it in more detail. But on that basis, I would like to see a joining together of our two amendments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McInnes. And a bit of feedback. And to second the coalition amendment, Councillor Doran.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I think Councillor McInnes has covered it quite thoroughly. I, of course, would also be very interested to hear where Councillor Ross is getting his information and facts from with air pollution, etc. It sounds fascinating, and I do wonder where you get it from. I would obviously be really keen to wait and see exactly what our information is from our officers coming forward. I second his motion.
Thank you. To move the amendment by the Conservative Group, Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I've been in contact with Councillor Ross on what he's put forward. understand we have agreement on the amendment that I am presenting to Councillor Ross's submission, and we've dealt with many of the concerns from the same number of residents, hundreds of residents, on this matter. And I think it's regrettable the way that Spaces for People and this latest proposal on the quiet route in the ongoing concern on Braid Road has become such a party political bun fight. And drawing on the comments of Councillor McInnes and the earlier exchange between Councillor Main with the council leader, these should not be party political issues, but people are dividing along these lines. So opposition councillors in particular are left with no recourse other than to use the full council and committee system to seek changes on residents' behalf. I agree that there is a mechanism, the Spaces for People inbox and the third-party comment space mapping tool for people to submit their comments. But the problem with that is that absolutely none of them are being listened to, and residents and businesses feel completely ignored. We see in the Green submission, Councillor Main trying to say that the Braidburn Terrace proposals are part of Spaces for People. It's taken over a decade to see action on Braidburn Terrace, so I don't want that shoehorned in with these measures that are being proposed under emergency legislation, which are actually quite distinct from what was going on there. Residents' views are not being listened to. I note, and I hope that local residents are listening, that Councillor Doran has provided her wholehearted support for the coalition and the Green motion, which clearly shows that the Labour Party do not support the reopening of Braid Road, which I think is contrary to what has been suggested by local Labour Party members in wards 9 and 10. So that's certainly something for the Labour group to reflect on in its communications with residents. I agree with what Councillor Ross says. Public consultation is essential. That's what we want to see on these increasing number of proposals that are coming forward. And as part of that, I want to see two things in terms of improvements to Braid Road, which includes the consideration of virtual speed humps, which I've raised with officers in respect of other roads in the ward. And I also want the road reopened pending the public consultation, so we don't have a gap of 3, 4, 5 months of closure, because that's doing real harm to the primary school aged children at South Morningside. It's causing congestion, and it's frankly bad for public transport, which, as far as I was concerned, this council always existed to support. But of course, cycling appears to trump all, including residents' views and the future of Lothian buses. On that note, I will move my amendment.
I'm waiting on the Lord Provost directing me to speak, but he's on mute.
I did direct you to speak, you just didn't hear me.
Thanks, Lord Provost. So, thank you. Yes, Councillor Ross's motion is extensive, and our Conservative amendment is only seeking to really reinforce the critical requirement to involve all of the relevant communities and stakeholders, because quite frankly, we have seen what happens when you don't do that elsewhere in the city. And yes, Councillor McInnes may be referring to us jumping the gun, but I think in this instance it's a very good idea. It's really important that we get all of the important public services, the educational institutions and all the different areas of the city that are involved and will be impacted in this, to allow them who have a legitimate interest to validate any of the schemes that may come forward. They will be able to help and shape and inform the plans, because they will truly understand what's going on in this part of the city. So I would suggest that perhaps doing things a little bit before the November committee may be a very good idea. And I'd also want to just quickly reference the commonplace mapping tool. Much is made of this, and it was referenced earlier on in leaders' questions. Remember, there's been 4,000 comments made on that common space mapping tool that is owned and controlled by Sustrans. We have had no confirmation that those 4,000 comments are from 4,000 individuals. And yes, there may be lots of thumbs up comments, but there is no way to do anything thumbs down. And despite asking on many committees that are all webcast live for that data to be provided, despite the answer to the questions and leaders' questions, we have not been given that. And I think it's time that we saw that. The reason we're asking for the permanent reopening of Braid Road is because, frankly, if we don't reopen this road, given the evidence of what is actually happening there right now, and the impact it's having on the residents living in the area, then we cannot with any sincerity state that we are genuinely interested in hearing their views. It is time we took direct action and demonstrated that we are actually listening to their pleas. And with that, I second our amendment.
You were on mute again, Lord Provost.
I won't repeat what I just said. Councillor Main to move the Green Amendment. Thank
you, Lord Provost. I am quite pleased in hearing the comments made by everyone who's spoken so far that the ask in the amendment that I put forward that councillors engage constructively with all stakeholders to ensure we have ongoing engagement with all residents, building support for active travel, and ensure that the schemes are transparent and have public validity to make sure we've got the best outcome for all local communities. It does appear to be something that we all agree on. However, my problem with this motion is that it appears to have taken a briefing sent to councillors on the 1st of September about several different issues that are incredibly important locally and put them into come to the conclusion that they were a single proposal that had been agreed without consultation. And Councillor McInnes has explained how this is not the case and some of the consequences of that. These three separate issues are really important in our area, as people have said, and I would love to see this evidence that apparently has already been gathered and is known to other parties. The congestion on Comiston Road, we need to understand, we need to have the cause, the level of congestion, the consequences of that, and what action we can take. And we don't yet have that information. So let's make sure that we do engage to make sure and deal with that when we know and have the facts before us. And the review of Braid Road, which was closed to allow exercise and active travel and was widely, when it closed, welcomed by residents. It is being reviewed. It has been reviewed regularly, and we look forward to seeing what comes forward in the next review. And on this quiet route, I have to say that this is a fantastic idea. It is a proposal that will link Fairmile Head to the city centre and allow people to cycle all that way. It will link all the schools, the primary schools, the head teachers, the parent councils. Many parents are already said they're supportive of this. It links the city centre and people in tenements to our green spaces. It provides a link to our local cinema and a safe back route to get to the shops. So this quiet route, yes, I've had a flood of support since Councillor Ross started to campaign that there was no public consultation and the proposal had been agreed. And I think looking the way, if you bring a motion to council, officers can't be asked questions. We can't have a proper discussion about those proposals. And I do think this is jumping the gun and pushing a particular agenda. And in particular, the motion appears to railroad through the wonderful and really foresighted Black Safe Routes scheme that has been worked on, is supported by Sustrans, by the schools and by the young people, and suggests an alternative. This is a very good scheme and it's a good idea to incorporate it. We need to listen to the local people and to hear their concerns, and that can be done through this process. And I'd like to correct Councillor Cook when he suggests that my amendment suggests in any way that the Braidburn Terrace safety proposals, which some residents have been waiting for 30 years and is now fully funded and will go ahead this year. The motion appears to suggest that some of the points, some of the major things in that redesign of the streets, including the crossing at the Hermitage, should be delayed by a further 3 months and brought into the Spaces for People scheme. That is absolutely not what I am suggesting, but it does appear to be what both the Conservative amendment and Councillor Ross's motion is doing. I've been really disappointed by the confusion and the misunderstanding that I would say is a distraction from the real questions that we need to be talking about with our residents. This quiet route is a very good idea. Let's hope that we can have good discussions with people and good discussions with our officers and come up with something that will work for everyone. My amendment simply asks for us to go through the process to engage constructively and in the way that has been set out and agreed by the Liberal Democrats on the 14th of May at Policy and Sustainability Committee. And with that, I propose our amendments. Thank you. I'm very happy to combine with the coalition amendment. It seems to make a great deal of sense and to lay out the situation very clearly for residents. Thank you.
To second the Green amendment.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I will second the Green amendment. Oh, sorry, my camera turned off and on there. I don't know why. I'm happy to second the Green amendment today and just want to make a few brief remarks about this debate and our amendment. Firstly, I think perhaps there's a bit of, I don't know, like lack of insight perhaps into the needs of different types of people who are travelling. And I would invite Councillor Ross to join with some of the school children who cycle, for example, to the primary school using part of the route that he's leaked effectively by leaking a member's briefing as a newsletter. Because I think what you'll find is that if you're a child on a bike and you're navigating your way at that age and at that size, you probably wouldn't perceive a quiet route to be safe, completely safe, even if it's quiet. And you would not perceive the route in the same way that a fully grown adult man perceives it as he cycles or walks along it. The issue isn't potholes. The issue is the need for safe and segregated infrastructure for people to walk, wheel and cycle. That's what's clear in all research around travel and transport, and the same issues that are researched thoroughly throughout the world apply in the Morningside ward. And I think it's quite disappointing to see Councillor Ross taking the same approach as his colleague Mr Cole-Hamilton in portraying this council's work as not consulting residents when it deeply cares about residents and does this work simply in order to improve our streets for and on behalf of residents. I don't quite understand why he's decided to take that turn, and I'm a bit disappointed because I did have a very high opinion of Councillor Ross, but having taken that approach and portraying the work of the council to engage with members first and then to consult diligently with residents has somehow been portrayed as a decision that's already been made is deeply disappointing. And so I am happy to second the Green amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rose.
Thank you. Thank you, Lord Provost. I won't repeat, but I very much agree with the comments that we've already had from Councillors Cook and Webber, and indeed from Councillor Ross as well. My comment really follows on a wee bit from what Councillor Mayne said about discussion with officials, and it's a relatively minor point in the bigger scheme of things, but it does feed into the issue of the feedback mechanism and the notifications to councillors, which the convener talked about a few moments ago. Part of this route comes through Ward 15, my ward, And I certainly didn't get any notification of it until very recently. I started getting lobby letters from particular campaign groups in relation to it. And indeed, in relation to the feedback mechanism generally on a previous scheme, I 3 times tried to contact Spaces for People after submitting detailed comments on it to be able to discuss some issues. And I know they're busy, and I know there's a lot of pressure for these things to go on, but the consultation even for councillors has not been good. I'll be supporting the Conservative amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I think I was quite surprised when Councillor Ross brought this motion forward, talking about a 3-month consultation about this, given that he's been actively petitioning to immediately reopen Braid Road. So at least the Conservatives are honest in the motion that they put forward about what they're trying to achieve, rather than face 2 ways at the same time. I just found that really disappointing. As a local ward councillor, I have been doing my absolute best to work with all the community, all the stakeholders, and as Nick Cook said, trying to work with all the councillors too, to arrive at a position where there is engagement, where there is evidence, and where emerging circumstances are considered. We cannot do this if we undertake lengthy consultations at each step along the way. We need to communicate clearly with our constituents about the reasons why we are taking the measures that we are taking. We need to take feedback from them and work through that feedback and get the proper information from Lothian buses about if they are experiencing delays on Comiston, from the Scottish Government about what recommendations are around public transport, whether the fact that people were using Braid Road as a rat run, or was it only local residents from the east of Comiston Road who were using it and who are now being pushed to take these longer journeys and to queue on the side streets trying to get onto Comiston Road, making those side streets more difficult for people crossing and for people who are trying to cycle. So there's a huge amount of evidence that we need. Councillor Ross referred to evidence that everybody else seems unaware of. He will get to sum up, and I'm sure he will use that opportunity to tell us exactly where his facts and figures have come from. Now, I'm supporting,
conclusion, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm supporting the coalition amendment with the Greens in agreement, because it says bring it to committee. Bring it to committee in November, having had a proper engagement, and I think that is the way to go, not putting it off indefinitely or making an immediate decision with no evidence now. So thank you, Provost.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I've said a brief comment. I imagine that's brief in the sense of the councillors of the City of Edinburgh. I just want to touch on, if I could, not so much the context of Councillor Neil Ross's motion, or indeed the amendments per se, but just more about some of the context of this debate, because I'm particularly, I think, if memory serves me correctly, I believe that Braid Road was closed, which Councillor Mayne mentioned, was for urgent requirement of space for exercising, and that was to do with the national rules that we had about how far we could and couldn't travel, and that was the same in different spots around the city as well. Another example being down at Silver Knowes. That restriction on how far we can travel, which placed a lot of pressure on local parks, green spaces and things, has now been lifted. So I'm struggling to understand that point of view. Another issue I sort of taken is about the slightly personal comments that are being directed towards Councillor Ross, almost indicating he doesn't understand the area in which he lives. I don't know how long that Neil Ross has lived in his ward, but I don't think it's really appropriate for other local members to be suggesting that he doesn't have a full understanding of them. I mean, and as well, the transport spokesperson for the Greens as well, indicating that this council really cares about consultation and whatnot. I wonder which side of the debate she was on when the consultations came back saying that residents didn't want to have Sunday parking charges, they didn't want to have a surcharge on the diesel parking permits, whatever side of the debate you're on with diesel parking permits. But for people that care so much but portray themselves as being sort of those that protect consultation, that consultation process, that is a glass house waiting to shatter. In fact, I believe it's already shattered for the Greens. I'll just leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Arthur.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I'd like to start by just getting really to the core of this, and I think it's perhaps been missed to some extent. I think there is a need, without a doubt, for Fairmile Head to be better connected to the outside world in terms of cycling infrastructure, without a doubt. And connecting it to the city centre, I think there is a long-standing need. So in a way, it's good that that is being addressed. But I think there is some uncertainty about these proposals, and no doubt that will be firmed up when it does come to committee, if that's the route we decide to take today. Not least, people in my ward wonder why Braid Road has to remain closed to support this quiet route, whilst we're installing simultaneously cycle infrastructure on Comiston Road, which runs parallel and is only a minute or two away. And I think both cyclists who live locally, spokes activists actually, and council officers themselves do accept that Braid Road is not popular with many cyclists because there's a particularly steep section on it, and there's also an adverse camber on a section of the road as well. So a bit of clarity is needed around some of this. But in terms of what the administration is proposing, I think I welcome the fact that we're going to have a meeting of local ward councillors, and I hope Ward 8 councillors are included in that, because this is a route, after all, that's supposed to connect Fairmile Head and the city centre. And that's important because so far there has been a lot of uncertainty around how the Spaces for People projects have been progressed and how they've been implemented. And I think a lot of that is to do about the way that the councillors had went around consulting on these projects. I think during the meeting today, I had yet another resident contact me saying that people have turned up outside our house with plans and they're going to paint lines in the road. What did I know about this? And this happens almost every day to me just now. And I really do feel for residents who are faced with this. So I think really what I'm wanting reassurance about in terms of how the administration plans to proceed is there an acceptance that perhaps the consultation process could be improved, and can we improve it going forward for this quiet route scheme? Will the options put to the committee contain the option of reopening Braid Road in some form? And given the complexity of this, and the fact that the suggested meeting day is November, it's quite a long way away, can we have a brief update in the business bulletin of the October meeting? I don't think these are unreasonable requests. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Arthur. I've got no other indications from elected members, so Councillor Neil Ross, right of reply.
Lord Provost, pardon me, I've just noticed there's a slight technical mistake in my amendment, and it refers to Ward 9 and it should refer to Ward 8. This might be helpful prior to Councillor Ross summing up.
Is this the line that says relevant school communities in Wards 9 and 10? You want that
That's
to read
correct. That
Wards
should be
8 and 10?
That's correct, Lord Provost, yeah.
Okay, no problem. We'll take that as a verbal amendment, Councillor Cook. Councillor Neil Ross, right of reply.
Thank you, Lord Provost. if I may make a few points of clarification. First of all, I have lived in my ward for 33 years. I would say that my motion includes a suggestion, by the way, for a segregated cycle lane on White House Lane, which I think could be used by children going to school. And thirdly, at this stage, my evidence with regard to increased congestion is from direct personal observation, as I live locally, and of course from the experience of local residents. I must admit, I am a bit confused about the Greens amendment. It seems to be in favour of engaging with all residents, which I approve of, and ensuring that the scheme has public validity, which I also approve of. That seems very similar to my proposal for an informal public consultation exercise, so why not just support my motion, which puts the quiet route proposal into a consultation, albeit with an alternative, but without prejudging the outcome. However, it also doesn't appear to amend anything, so I can't accept it. I should say that as soon as the briefing note was issued, I asked for information on how this would be taken forward and for a timescale, but I received no response. I welcome commitments from the Transport Convener for further discussion at a private meeting of councillors and at the November meeting of the Transport and Environment Committee. But as the Coalition Amendment insists on deleting all of my motion, I'm afraid I can't accept it. I would like to know, however, if an informal public consultation exercise, as I've proposed and probably conducted online, might appear as an option along with some of the other suggestions I've made in the report which will be presented to this committee. The Conservative amendment is constructive and adds value, so I'm willing to accept it as verbally amended by Councillor Cook. I want to reduce unnecessary car use and to encourage cycling. And I'm convinced that these quiet route proposals, I am unconvinced that these quiet route proposals will achieve that in the absence of any objective evidence. Traffic orders, though, were not intended to be used in this way. They were designed for emergency use to help social distancing during the pandemic. And I'm not pretending that they will do that here. I recognise there are legitimate concerns from parents about safe routes to schools. They naturally want to ensure the safety of their children going to and from school each day, whether on foot or by bike. So could we look at some form of time-limited road closures or extended school streets scheme that perhaps could cater for this? It need not mean closures applying 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We should be seeking compromises that work for everyone. My plea is to give residents a chance to engage with this plan, to understand what it's about, to express their views, to contribute their ideas, and to influence the final outcome. Participation and engagement, that's what makes our liberal democracy work. Thank you, Lord Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Just before we go to the vote, Gavin, I just want to clarify a misconception that was raised during Councillor Main's contribution. There is no reason whatsoever under standing orders why we cannot have a full debate at full council with officers answering elected member questions. No reason at all. Anyway, Gavin, to the vote.
Thank you, Lord Provost. So we have a motion by Councillor Neil Ross, seconded by Councillor Lang, that has accepted the Conservative amendment as verbally amended by Councillor Cook, seconded by Councillor Webber. We have a coalition amendment moved by Councillor McInnes, seconded by Councillor Doran, which has been combined with the Green amendment, which was moved by Councillor Main and seconded by Councillor Miller. So coming to the vote, we will have the motion, which is, as I said, Councillor Ross's motion with the Conservative amendment added to it, and the amendment which combines the coalition and the Green amendments. Can I take us to the roll call vote then, please? And Lord Provost.
Amendment.
Councillor Aldridge.
For the motion.
Councillor Arthur? Councillor Arthur? We can come back to Councillor Arthur. Councillor Barry?
For the motion.
Councillor Bird?
Amendment, please.
Councillor Booth?
Amendment.
Councillor Bridgman?
Motion, please.
Councillor Brown?
The motion, please.
Councillor Bruce?
Motion.
Councillor Burgess?
Amendment, please.
Councillor Cameron? Councillor Jim Campbell?
Motion.
Councillor Kate Campbell?
Amendment, please.
Councillor Mary Campbell?
Amendment, please.
Councillor Child?
Amendment.
Councillor Cook?
Motion.
Councillor Corbett?
Amendment.
Councillor Day?
Amendment.
Councillor Dickey?
Amendment.
Councillor Dixon?
Amendment, please.
Councillor Doggett?
Motion.
Councillor Doran?
Amendment, please.
Councillor Douglas?
Motion, please.
Councillor Fullerton?
Amendment.
Councillor Gardner?
The amendment, please.
Councillor Gloyer?
Motion.
Councillor Gordon?
Amendment, please.
Councillor Henderson?
Amendment, Gavin.
Councillor Howie?
Amendment.
Councillor Hutchison?
Motion.
Councillor Johnson?
Motion.
Councillor Key?
Amendment, please.
Councillor Laidlaw?
Motion.
Councillor Lang?
Motion.
Councillor McInnes?
Amendment.
Councillor Main?
Amendment.
Councillor McClellan?
Motion.
Councillor McNeice-Meakin?
Amendment, please.
Councillor McVeigh?
Amendment, please.
Councillor Miller?
Amendment, please.
Councillor Mitchell?
A motion, please.
Councillor Mowat?
Motion, please.
Councillor Munn?
Amendment.
Councillor Monroe?
Amendment.
Councillor Osler?
Motion, please, Gavin.
Councillor Perry?
Amendment, please.
Councillor Ray?
Amendment, please.
Councillor Rose?
Motion.
Councillor Neil Ross?
Motion, please.
Councillor Rust?
Motion.
Councillor Smith?
Motion, please.
Councillor Staniforth?
Amendment.
Councillor Watt?
Amendment.
Councillor Webber?
Motion, please.
Councillor White?
Motion.
Councillor Wilson?
Amendment, please.
Councillor Work?
Amendment.
And Councillor Young?
Motion.
And do we have Councillor Arthur?
I don't intend to record a vote for this one, Gavin. Thank you.
Thank you. Which means we have 32 votes for the amendment, 25 votes for the motion, and the amendment is carried.
Okay, thank you, Gavin. I think that's an appropriate time to break for lunch. It's currently just coming up to 1:10. I suggest we reconvene at 1:50. Okay, thank you.